Hello, everyone, and welcome to the World Explorer podcast, where it is the first Sunday of the month, and therefore means another episode of Worldbuilding Basics, where we talk about a concept for 30 minutes to an hour, just for funs. I'm Casey, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Isaac.
Yos are fun.
Not when you sound depressed saying them. Were you trying to be cool and it just not work?
Well, the first one was supposed to be a cool sounding yo. And then the second one was supposed to be, oh, he made a funny because it's a yo-yo, which is a toy. It didn't work, clearly.
I think you overthought that way too much, but we're not here for bad jokes. We're here for world building basics, and I get to pick the theme this month. And Isaac, I have a question for you.
Okay.
How's the weather?
Fine. Actually, I'm gonna open the window. I can't see. No, it's rather nice. It's kind of cool outside, but yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about weather today.
Are we world building weather?
Yeah, we're going to talk about how weather affects... Weather is something that has such a huge impact on things. We could talk about the psychological, I'm trying to think of the word and my brain's melting.
Symbolism?
Yes, that's it. It's symbolism. Yes, so we could talk about weather being symbolism, or the effect it can have on stories, cool weather systems, and like what that can do, like having unique ones. Lots to talk about.
I want to say something real quick.
Yeah.
Somewhat recently, somebody left a comment on one of my videos where I had complimented the weather system, or it might have been a community post, I don't remember. Anyway, I complimented the weather system in My Little Pony for being so cool and unique and interesting part of world building where the Pegasi controlled the weather. And then someone was like, what's so unique and cool about this? It's just a normal thing. There's been a ton of stories about gods controlling the weather and everything. And I'm like, yes, but here's why they did it differently, and here's why it's so cool. So yeah, I am down with this world building.
Awesome. So we're going to talk about the weather today. Please don't click off. I swear it's not going to be boring. It's not that type of weather conversation.
We're going to make weather that rains fire and acid.
I mean, yeah, you could. Like, we could talk about the endless possibilities of weather. Or we could start out actually kind of defining what weather is. Because weather is the environment that your Earth is causing. So it's pretty much natural things that's happening to your environment. So things such as like earthquakes, hurricanes, storms, rain, flooding, droughts, things like that all qualify under weather. So it's just pretty much external forces. So your characters don't really have any say usually. Sometimes they do. But usually they don't have any say in what's happening. And it's just the environment coming at them. And that's what makes weather, I think, so exciting. Is that it can happen spontaneously. Your characters have no real way of controlling it usually. Or if they do, it's a cool superpower that you get to show off. And it also has like a major impact and effect on whatever story you're creating.
Yeah, and generally, the thing about the weather when you're world building something is the weather in one location, depending on the terrain, might have vastly different effects on another location, depending on the terrain. And what I mean by this is, let's say you have a terrain that's mostly rock, and you got maybe a bunch of dips and just craters, and practically everything is rock. There's not much in the way of soil or plants. If there was to be some rain there, they would have a massive flooding problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the highest points would not get much in the way of flooding, but all around them there would be a bunch of areas that are covered in water.
Yeah,
whenever it rains. It doesn't even have to be a big rain.
Yeah, for example, after dehydration and overhydration, the third most popular death in the Grand Canyon is flash flooding. Yeah, they get really bad flash floods.
Yeah, but however, if you could take that same amount of rain and put it in something like dense forest or jungle, someplace with a bunch of plant life and soil, and all of the water will just get soaked up.
Yeah. Yeah, so your environment does have a say on how weather affects things, which is very important to keep in mind. So don't go into a jungle which is used to having tons of rain and say all of a sudden it's flooding, unless you are like pouring ungodly amounts of water into this jungle. Like you have to, it takes a lot to flood a jungle, versus a canyon where if you say you're putting ungodly amounts of rain in the canyon, there should be flooding. It should be horrific. It should cause landslides, mudslides. In other words, weather is something that it's usually good to do research on. We don't normally say this in the world building channel because we don't do research ever, which we just don't.
We will sometimes research in the middle of our world building. Like while we're world building something, we'll
Google.
research on something. We'll do the Google.
Yeah, but like weather is something that you kind of need some more in-depth dive into, unless of course you're playing with magical weather, which is always a fun thing to do.
Magical weather is the best weather. There's a million different ways you could take it.
Yeah. For example, one of the podcasts you can actually watch on their channel, which is I think it's like A City in the Clouds with Our Puffs.
Living on Clouds with Our Puffs.
That has some really fun weather elements in that we have the clouds being living creatures, but at the same time they just do mini weather things. It's the homeland these people live on causes the weather, and the weather actually affects your social status. So if you live in the storm on a storm cloud, you're considered like lower society versus living on a white fluffy pretty cloud, in which case you're like considered higher society. Normally weather doesn't affect a character's society position, but at the same time, it kind of does, actually, if you think about it, at least in real worlds. Places of high flooding and drought tends to be poorer communities than those that have, like, a good medium, simple rain level, like, enough to keep crops alive and stuff.
Well, that would be because, like, if you can afford the nicer location that's less prone to flooding, then naturally, like, the richer people are gonna end up living there.
Yeah. So, actually, weather does affect social. Especially when you think if you're stuck living in a place full of hurricanes constantly, or a place... earthquakes is a weird one, because there are cities that have tons of earthquakes, and yet we still build cities, and a lot of rich people live there. I don't understand that. I don't get why people like living in those areas. I mean, I guess they have nice weather and pretty beaches, but... let's build...
Now, drifting a little bit away from weather, but still on the same topic, weather is when you are world building weather. Like, let's go back to the rocky terrain example.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a civilization of people who are just hanging out on these rocks or in a canyon, they're going to be aware of the chance of flooding. And so how are they going to prepare for it? Like, for example, if they have craters, one of the things that they definitely would not do is build a house in that crater. So if you might want to have your dramatic story where the rain comes in and washes up all of these houses in the craters, and now these people are left homeless. Yeah, if I'm reading that, I'm gonna say this is bad world building, because they should have known better, and it's like it's on them for building their house in a crater.
But then again, there is like you have the first experience card to play, where like these are new people to this area. They have no clue really how the weather affects it. If you've never seen a canyon, sure, we can look at a canyon now and having tons of education and stuff, we can look at a canyon and say, oh yeah, that would make sense that rain would cause issues here, just because we have basic knowledge of weather from middle school. But someone who doesn't have that knowledge and they see a canyon, they would think, you know what, living in there is probably safe because I don't think there's many predators. I'm closer to that river that's nearby, so I don't have to walk far. The soil's probably nicer there. There's less rock climbing because we can just stay in the chasm. And they would build a home there. And then the first big rainstorm comes and it's just wiped out. And at that point, they realize it's a bad idea and they move up.
So do we want to talk about, like, magical weather or
Sure.
Whether that okay, 'cause yeah, that's the fun stuff is magic weather. So where do we which direction do we? There's many directions we can go with this. Which direction do we want to go with the magic weather? Because we could go weather that's being created and controlled by some uh,
Yeah,
sentient
let's
force. We could
go
do
weather as a weapon.
okay, weather as a weapon.
Because it is.
Um,
It can be, anyways.
so I assume like weather is controlled at this point.
Yeah, weather can be
Uh,
controlled in stories.
okay, so yeah, there's all kinds of different ways that weather can be used as a weapon. You could, if, for example, if somebody has the ability to strike lightning or send tornadoes towards someone, that's pretty devastating. You can lock your opponents in a very long lasting winter. Like the White Witch from Narnia. She just it's not she doesn't really use winter as a weapon, but she does
I mean, she uses
have
it as a
that
trap, yeah.
yeah.
As a controlling factor. She uses it to weaken the people and force them to rely on her and make her their queen. And she
Yeah.
also uses it as a way to keep Father Christmas out. Fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's a big element.
whether like you could use all kinds of weather as weapons, and generally, if I was a villain who wanted to deal a bunch of damage to the good guys, I had the ability to control weather, I would look at their terrain and say what is going to hurt them the most.
Or
For
even
example, is
what
there
makes most sense, like what's logically would appear, so that way they don't suspect the villain knows they're coming and is trying to stop them.
yeah, like imagine this. You got their terrain that is prone to landslides if enough rain hits a certain area. Well, just send some storm clouds over there. Uh, you want to. You don't even. Yeah, there's this problem with lightning where if you send a thundercloud over something and you strike it with lightning, the fire might like over a tree. Strike the tree with lightning to set a forest on fire. The rain might put it out. Well, if you can send one little lightning bolt over, or send a single cloud that's striking lightning rapidly, or even just a single lightning bolt, you can start setting a fire to a forest without needing to worry about the rain extinguishing it.
I mean,
Because there being little to no rain.
I think this also gives up a good point is that one of the things that's so fascinating about weather is that sure you may claim you're able to control it, but there is still this element of force, uncontrollable force related to it, like a thunderstorm. If the lightning strikes something you didn't mean it to, you now have fire, and that's hard to control. Or like a flood or something, or an earthquake accidentally causing a tsunami, which is the giant water waves that wipe out entire cities unintentionally, or you bring in this big storm, but by doing so you're taking water that was needed in another area and suddenly you're causing a drought in that zone and flooding in another, and you're completely messing up the weather cycle, because you can do that surprisingly easy. You can mess up the weather cycles. Like, we've made dams and stuff IRL, and these things have changed wind patterns and such, and like caused not always terrible changes, but changes to the weather and environments around them.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of where else to go with this. Like, what next step? This one's a lot harder to like chain all of the thoughts together on.
Yeah, we're kind of just spieling about weather. Which I don't
Yeah.
think's a bad thing. Like, weather is a very diverse thing. I mean, we can move on to symbolism, which is my favorite part about weather. Is how you
Okay.
use it to symbolize things. Like, you have the classic things. Like, every movie has this scene where everything is bad, and the person's like, "Well, it couldn't get worse," and then it rains.
Of course, like that's always a classic. You see that all the time. Like that's always whenever somebody says it couldn't get worse, and it's not like they're surrounded by enemies or anything dramatic like that. It's going to rain, and it will be very sudden.
Yeah.
It'll be sunny, and then all out of the sudden, out of nowhere, thunder will strike and rain will pour.
Yeah, which at this point I don't think people appreciate as much. Like, we're over it. It was funny that one time in Tarzan, but now it's not funny anymore.
Yeah, like it's been overused.
Just a lot. But I mean, also something to think about is like elements of weather and what they represent. So something like water, we often like to think like rain means sadness and depression, but in a lot of other cultures and such, it actually means like life and hope. Or if you have a drought, having rainfall is like a crazy exciting good thing. So it's all very circumstance related. So if you're in a nation that has very little water and you rely on it a lot, rain is suddenly like something to be celebrated. Like if you're having a bad day and it starts raining, all of a sudden you're having a good day now. Like it changes the mood in the reverse. Otherwise, if you are in a place that gets like a lot of flooding, or you just there's a season and it's just depressing and you're just sick of it and you're just stuck inside all the time because it rains so much, then obviously rain would be associated with depression and isolation because that's what it does. It prevents you from going out and doing the things you want to do because you're now stuck inside. So it definitely takes on your environments, affects what how you view like certain weather. Cuz if you live in a desert, sunny days are what's tiring and overbearing versus rainy days, which is like relief and cool air and life.
I'm trying to think of other symbolism. Like that's the main one that people think of when it
There's
comes to
like yeah,
weather and
rain and
symbolism.
sun.
Like it's like rain and sun. Like, but I don't see things like hurricane or tornado ever being associated with anything other than destruction.
I'm it's
Which that is something that you can do very often to make your story feel unique. Is take something that's often used or is a classic tool that people use for writing, like uh, weather equaling something symbolically, and then change it to mean something else. For example, making instead of making rain mean sadness and isolation, it could mean joy and life. Uh, Tornadoes, which are usually associated with destruction and horror and loss, could be maybe associated with fun. I don't know. Like tornadoes could be fun.
And also, this probably goes more deeper into symbolism, but I guess it's still an important thing to know is that symbolism is based off of culture. So if you're writing a story and you're basing your story's culture off of another culture, it's usually good to see like what the weather is like in their area and how they view different things, cuz and that will give you a good idea of how they would view things like rain and stuff. Cuz if you have I'm gonna use Raya and the Last Dragon. I know that Isaac hasn't seen that movie, but it's such a good example of how they use water and rain. Uh,
La 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 la
it's
la
not
la
it's
la.
not spoiling anything
Okay.
important. Like I'm not spoiling plot or anything. So pretty much all it is that they live in a culture where the big dragons are associated with water, and water is associated with life, and therefore when rain is considered like this joyful, happy thing, it's the thing that stops the evil monsters. Like it's a big deal. The rain and water and stuff is something to be celebrated. So when it's raining, they take it as a time of celebration, and they'll like be dancing in the rain, and it's really pretty, and such. So and that's a cultural thing from Asian cultures. They have a bigger respect for rain than some say a Western culture where we just don't care for it as much.
We
Even
have an entire song about it. Rain, rain, go away, come again some other day. We have an entire song about how much we hate rain.
Yeah, so I honestly think Western culture is in the minority in the liking rain department and the hating rain department. I'm pretty sure majority of cultures love it and like understand its importance. And just we Western people are sad and really just need to learn to look on the bright side of things and realize that rain's actually very pretty
We're
and
very
needed.
bad at that.
We are. It's a problem, and we're spreading it into other cultures, and we need to stop.
Like, look at that! A rainbow! Look, my boots are soggy!
Yeah. That's another thing to think about rain is that certain different people will react to it differently. So you could have people who like rain or people who like sunny things, and that is going to affect how your characters interact with each other. Like, if you're on a mission and your characters are trudging through rain, and you have one character that's, like, going around splashing in the puddles, singing, dancing, just having a grand time, and you have another character who's just upset because their shoes are wet and everything's sloshy and they're just miserable, their fights might ensue, grumpiness might ensue, weird in-depth, maybe there's some in-depth talk. The amount of in-depth talks in movies that happen when it's raining about how, like, the rain, people's dislike of rain then associates to, like, some deep dark childhood trauma that comes up when the happy character who likes the rain asks them why they don't like rain would amaze you.
Going back to the example earlier of people controlling weather, there's actually something else you can do with this, where you twist symbolism and everything, where oftentimes you might have a character who has some sort of elemental power, and then that power is reflective of their personality or their character. For example, Avatar: The Last Airbender, fire is associated with destruction, and pain, and anger, rage. And so we see a lot of firebenders who will fight with anger and rage. Like, that's literally what fuels Zuko. Water is often associated with healing. So, naturally, Katara would be a healer. Anyway, so something else that you can do is twist what they are most commonly associated with, or make them associated with something else, like we were talking about before, but it would be shown through a character. For example, in Rise of the Guardians, Jack Frost has ice powers. Ice is generally associated with cold, death, isolation, hunger, starvation. But in Rise of the Guardians, instead, Jack makes it about fun. And just hanging out with their friends and playing games. Like, it's all about fun.
And it was a cool moment, and it made you want to cry a little.
It was a very good movie.
It was. Rise of the Guardian, I think, is my favorite DreamWorks movie.
It needed maybe another 20 minutes of runtime, and then it would have been just, like, really excellent.
All you're saying is our movie recommendation, we have two. Go watch Raya and the Last Dragon and watch Rise of the Guardian. They're both incredibly good movies. And both slept on, I feel. Like, very slept on, and they should be.
Yeah, and go watch Avatar: The Last Airbender. I don't care if you've already seen it. Go watch it. Go watch it again. And again.
Yeah.
Like...
Or you could go and fill your head with multiple stories and not just the same one over and over again.
It's a very good series. So you go and you watch an episode, and when you analyze it, you come back and you watch it again, you analyze the same episode again, there's a bunch of stuff you missed. It's really good.
Anyways, I do like the idea of, especially when you have the ability to control weather, that is something that's going to latch onto your personality. Going deeper, I also will affect how other people view you. So you might be, like, the most bubbly, happy character, like, you've ever written. But their ability is to create thunderstorms. And so, despite them naturally being happy and, like, wanting to help and being good-natured and stuff, their entire society is not going to view them as such. Because their ability is terrifying, it's dangerous, and they're going to be very negative towards this character. They might even, like, threaten her, and in her fear, she'll produce storms, which will then just continue that cycle of them thinking she's actually dangerous. But in reality, she's not naturally that way. She just wants to live her best life and be happy and produce rain for people if they'd let her in a safe environment.
It's Elsa, but with thunder instead of ice.
Yeah. I mean, Frozen's an interesting example to use for that, in that she can create winter, and is associated with, like, coldness and stuff, and how they turned that around and said, yeah, but at the same time, I don't know, it's weird. She can produce ice powers, but their whole idea is that love thaws it. So it's almost still like she produces something negative still, And it's only because people love her that it's now a positive thing. Like, ice is
Yeah,
still
but there
seen
was
negative. It's weird.
yeah, but if you actually like sort of read between the lines, look at the actions and how she uses the ice, you also notice that there's also an element of fear, where if she's using the ice out of fear, it does become incredibly dangerous and life threatening. Where like when she does it in front of the crowd during the coronation,
Yeah.
out of just out of anger and the fear, like it's all extremely sharp and almost hits
Jagged.
several people.
Yeah.
But when she's alone, and she no longer has those fears, if she's not creating it out of really negative emotions, but she has full control over it. It's just she lets it go, and uh, unleashes all of her power to create a castle.
And it's really pretty and detailed and intricate and delicate, even, which shows just kind of how fear is such a scary thing, but like you can still overcome it and make dainty, delicate things and grand things and beautiful things. And I don't know, Frozen I think has a really powerful message, and I get people think the movie's overrated, but it doesn't change the fact it's a good movie. Go watch
I don't
Frozen
think
again
it's
too.
overrated. It's just overplayed.
That's it, yeah. Go watch the
Like it's an
movie. Don't
excellent.
listen to the songs on repeat.
It is an
Actually watch the
excellent,
movie.
excellent movie. It has fantastic songs, but because it was so good, people played it way too much, both the movie and the songs, and it ruined it for everyone. Like, we are going to be 70 years old, our grandkids are going to come up to us and be like, hey, I just learned about this movie called Frozen, and we'll be like, don't say that word, but it's an excellent movie. Don't you dare mention it.
Yeah, we've all been traumatized by Frozen. Just the amount of I think it's mostly the aggressive marketing. Like Disney, take a chill pill. It's okay.
Yeah, the marketing definitely
It
didn't
still
help,
is.
but
It's been
they
years.
marketed it so much because people loved it so much, and so when people overplay it, they marketed it more. That gets into people's head, and then they play it even more, and it's just an
And
endless
now we're
cycle
completely
of
off
awful.
topic. We're just ranting about Frozen, and we're here to talk about weather, Isaac.
Yes, let's go back to the boring topic of weather.
Weather is not boring. We've established that already. That was the first thing we talked about, was that weather is not boring. Sure,
Okay, so
sometimes you
let's
have to do a bunch of research on weather and it could be boring for your story, but it doesn't mean you talking about it has to be boring.
let's get into some unique weather systems, like where you're creating weather out of something that would not normally be associated with weather. Like for example, you might have rain, except on this planet it rains rocks.
That sounds
There's
horrifying.
I actually saw a movie where that happened. I don't really recommend the movie. I think it's called Planet 51. Uh,
I don't like that movie. I've seen it once.
yeah,
No,
you
no,
see
don't do
why
it.
I don't recommend it.
Yeah, don't want that. Instead, if you want a movie with weird weather that's okay, just go watch Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
Oh yeah, that's a good one where they did something fun with the weather. Like the whole science of it makes no sense, but
We
it's
don't even
not
care.
really meant to. They try to
Yeah.
like sort of throw a bunch of techno babble at you, and it's like just go with it.
It's like we don't
Just
want the techno battle. We just want to watch ice cream rain from the sky. Okay,
yeah.
like,
It's like they throw in a little bit of science there to make it sound somewhat legit, but if you think about it for 2 seconds, it doesn't work.
but still,
Uh,
the weather was
but they
not dull in
tried.
that movie. I can tell you that. It was very
No, it
fascinating.
is not. Like, and something else you can do is like we mentioned earlier, raining fire. Um, you could have different. You could have multiple things happening at the same time that don't normally happen together. Like you could have a hailstorm uh, while it's raining fire.
Yeah.
You could
And
have yeah, all sorts of mixed elements. You could make it rain acid. You could have, which the acid rain is actually a real thing.
I know,
Uh,
it's scary.
yeah.
I mean,
All sorts of things.
another fun thing you can do with the weather is actually personify it, like make it an entity with like a mind of its own. My first thought whenever I think of this is Hercules, which in Hercules the Titans are actually natural disasters with like not the greatest intelligence in that movie, but like they've got intelligence. You have a hurricane, you have an ice storm, you have a giant that's really good at making earthquakes. You have a volcano guy. Like these are natural disasters that take on a person's face. And when a kid, I was always like, "That's really cool. I wish they did more with it." Was always my thought. Like this battle feels like it should be so much more epic than it is, because these things are cool.
It probably should have been.
I think they took the dullest guy out of the group and sent him to fight Hercules, and I'm still mad at it. Like, you have all these cool natural disasters, and we're gonna send the one giant. Like, really? Really? No epic? So we don't get an epic fight scene.
Well, I want to know how he's supposed to fight, like, a volcano, like, all the lava. How do you fight that?
Yeah, I guess that was the idea, was, like...
Maybe they just accidentally made them too powerful with no weaknesses, and...
So they had to throw in a weak guy and send him off, which... it feels so unrealistic that he would do that. Like, Hades is so determined to make sure this guy's eliminated, and he sends the weakest titan of them all to take care of it. Like, really? I don't know. We're ranting a lot about movies today.
You are.
Weather leads to movie rants is what we've discovered.
Apparently.
I'm gonna blame that on our mindset of society, in that when you talk about the weather, it's supposed to be a starter conversation. So we're just determined to move. Our subconscious is determined to move up into other conversations, because it's like, we've already said hello. We've already talked about the weather. Let's talk about movies now. So I'm blaming it on society and their standards on it.
Yes, that's got to be it. That's why we can't stay focused.
Exactly. It's not because every single episode we've ever made is like this. No, totally not. That's not the reason. I feel like world building basics is the worst, though. I think we get off topic on them a lot.
We do somehow. I don't know why.
Yeah, I guess it's because we don't have like a world we're focused on building and like can get invested in. We're just talking about concepts and we're jumping between them a lot, which means it's very easy to get off topic when you're jumping about a bunch.
Yeah. Something else you could do is, if you're trying to make a world that is not necessarily a sphere, I don't really see this done because most of the time when people are world building, they put it on a planet, a spherical orb floating through space. But for the few that don't, you can have some fun weather.
They don't do that, though.
What?
Narnia. But they don't care about weather much in Narnia.
Yeah, but for example, floating islands, because floating islands are really easy, really popular, and really fun. Just floating islands in the sky. What would the weather be like for some place like that? Like, let's say we have a blanket of clouds floating by. For a higher up island, it would be sunny. For the ones below, it would be rainy. Maybe because of the way the gravity works around the islands, the clouds actually swirl around, and sometimes they will go up and then left and then they go down in random directions. What would the wind currents be like? What causes wind there?
Yeah.
Maybe it's possible for it to rain upward instead of just downward,
it's like a game I'm playing. I'm playing a video game, and it's called Celeste, and the goal is to climb this mountain, and I'm at a point where I'm like traveling up this mountain, and all of a sudden it starts raining upward. I was just like, okay, this is and the sad part is, this is like the least craziest thing that has happened on my mountain climbing journey. I didn't even bat an eye. I'm like, okay, this is a thing now, and I just kept going. But yeah, so that's a video game where they switch the rain once you got to a certain elevation, which was an interesting choice. But
Well, now I have a question for you.
Yes.
What is your favorite example of where you've seen world building in terms of weather done? What is your favorite example of world building weather?
Ooh. Wasn't prepared for this. I don't know, most of the stories I read. Okay, it's probably actually gotta be I'm gonna go with a really old one, which is the Illidad, where the gods just use weather to mess with the characters in that story just so much. They're like, whirlpool, go. Tornado, go. You have this bag of wind and you don't bother to tell your crew what's inside it, so they open it and then suddenly you're shot all the way back to the beginning of your adventure, halfway through the book. Yes, let's go. It's just funny to me. They just use weather to mess with these guys so hard, and it's great.
Yeah, that's like where you can take something like.
Or that's the Odyssey, by the way.
Like
I don't know why I said the Illidad. That's a different
that's where you
story.
can take like gods controlling the weather, and just push that to its extreme.
I love it when weather's just used almost in a funny way to mess with people. Because it's so useful for that. Like, you want to stop with someone and you're just like, mini twister, send them all the way back to the beginning. Literally, the Odyssey, halfway through the book, has a reset button. Where they open up this wind and suddenly they're pushed all the way back to the beginning. And you just sit there like, well, or nearly the beginning, and they weren't quite there, but still, you just sat there like, well, that was several up, and the windbag's empty now. Way to go, guys. I'm like, well, if you trusted your crew better, half these issues you've caused wouldn't have happened, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah, I can't remember if that's the Iliad or the Odyssey.
It's the Odyssey. It's definitely the Odyssey.
Yeah.
I said the wrong one. That's my bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that
the Illidad's
kind
the
of
Trojan War. Sorry. I was looking
Troy story.
Yeah. Yep.
Gods
mess with people a different way there.
Yeah, I think that people very often what I see in world building is people don't always take concepts to their extreme. Like sometimes you don't want to, but there's a lot of times where I see somebody using a very cool, interesting concept, but then they don't take it as far as they could have to make it 10 times cooler. And sometimes it'll just be a little thing, very little thing that just sits there in the background, or they use it once or whatever and it's gone. They ignore it. But it's something that could be taken extremely far and used in a million different ways. Or if you were to just increase its power level, you could completely reshape the world. And that sadly doesn't happen as much as it probably should.
Yeah, I think in other words, like to summarize everything we've talked about today, just don't sleep on weather. Weather is way cooler than you think. It has a huge impact on your story. It's fun sometimes to make it like it could be something subtle. It could have something that has impacts on like how the reader perceives a character or an event or something that's happening, or it could be this crazy thing that's wall barrier in the way of your character. It could honestly just be that it happened to be raining that day. It's got a huge spectrum, and it's something you should be considering when you're world building is what's the weather, because it's something that when it's missing from a story, you feel it reading. Like you don't think like what's missing from the story, and you don't usually say, oh, it's the weather. Like this author's not describing what's going on outside very well, but the reader tends to still notice that it's missing, even if they can't like name that that's what's missing. So don't forget about the weather. It's cool. It can be cool.
This is the most boring episode ever.
Well, now I'm offended because it was my week to pick the theme and you didn't.
It was a joke because weather.
Weather's not boring.
No, we've
let's
had
kill
much more
stereotype.
boring
Yeah, I was gonna say let's kill the stereotype. Weather is not boring. Let's talk about the weather more, guys.
Weather has no feelings. Stereotypes don't matter.
There's a lot to unpack in those two statements, and we are out of time. So we will see you guys next week.
We could world build with weather having feelings, couldn't we? There was a Pixar short where the weather had feelings, and then he rained.
we're gonna call it quits here, guys. We'll see you next week with some where we'll be building another world. Maybe it'll have something to do with weather. Maybe it won't. We never know till we get there. But we're gonna say bye here, guys. So bye.
It's raining tacos from out of the sky. Tacos, no need to ask why. I know that I said I wouldn't do any more songs now, but this one was just way too easy, so I'm going with it.
Yeah, I was about to say, I thought we were done with those, and then you started singing.
We were, but this was way too easy.
Alrighty then.